This is Shoshanah Shear from beahappymom.com and my online store on creationsfromjerusalem.com. In this video, we're going to be covering a couple of thoughts about success, what it is to be successful. And before we continue with that, I'd like to just remind you, if you haven't done so already, to please subscribe to this channel and click on that bell to be notified of further videos as they come out. So the theme of this video again is all about the topic of success, and I'm following on from a video that I brought out last week from a mastermind I participated in. So there's some challenges, masterminds and so on that deal very much with the concept of financial success, and I want to bring out a couple of thoughts of some other important concepts to consider in our path of life and to figure out what it is to be successful. There's so much more to success than financial success, although obviously financial independence is extremely important and helps us to achieve our goals. So the first story that I want to share is just a snippet of of a client that I worked with many, many years ago. I learned a tremendous amount from this little boy. He was 6 years old when I started working with him. And I worked with him for close to 2 years. The remarkable thing about this little boy was that he was blind from birth. He'd spent a good portion of his life in the hospital, and he could do absolutely nothing when I started working with him. Towards the end of the close to 2 years that I worked with him, from time to time, I would ask him a couple of questions to try and gauge how he was progressing and whether we could start to consider placing him in a school for the blind or what direction we would be going once he was discharged from the hospital. And the phenomenal thing with this little boy was that he developed a tremendous sense of humor, and he was able to answer questions in all sorts of humorous ways, showing quite a quick wit to the surprise of many of the staff who thought that perhaps he was only trainable. To me, an amazing answer that he gave when I asked him if he had 3 wishes, what would he wish? Now, you might think that a child who's born blind would say, I really want to see again, or there are all sorts of things that one might consider. He wants to be able to read. He wants to be able to play a game, to meet somebody. There are all sorts of things that we think a child might answer. He had 2 wishes. He was quite happy to forego the third one. The 2 wishes were he wanted to go to school and he wanted to praise the Lord. And that to me shows a tremendous inner strength and a quality that is so important in a successful life. The next snippet that I want to share is of somebody that I worked with who was involved in a car accident, had a very severe head injury, and right at the beginning of her coming into hospital, it was very much touch and go as to whether she'd survive. She not only survived a severe head injury, as I say, all 4 limbs were affected, but she went on to come out of a coma that she'd been in for quite a number of months. She came out of the coma, she regained full function of her limbs, and although she'd been an A student prior to coming into hospital, she managed to complete her schooling and was quite a well-rounded person. I've lost touch with her. I have no idea what happened to her since then. But having been happy enough to be a so-called average student, this for her was a tremendous achievement, considering the fact that she so nearly didn't survive the car accident. So that's another illustration of what it is to be successful. Some people might say for a student to be successful, getting straight A's at the end of school would be a measure of success. But for this girl, having achieved even a pass was a tremendous achievement. Another thought from another client that I worked with, a few of the younger clients that I worked with having come in with either spinal cord injury or head injury following some kind of an incident that took place. A couple of them towards well on like 6 months or more into their rehab were able to turn around and say that they felt remorse for the activities they'd been involved with and wanted to make a complete change of their lives for the better. A few of them wanted to start to read the Bible. One of my clients had been encouraged by a number of the team members to write his story. They thought that there was a lot of inspiration that he could write. And for me, an incredibly valuable lesson that I learned was his being able to turn around to the staff members and say he didn't want to write his story because he didn't want to give ideas to other people to get into bad lifestyle. He wanted to rather figure out what he could write that would be hopeful and meaningful towards doing something beneficial with one's life instead of talking about the kinds of activities he'd been involved in before. And that I thought was an incredible, once again, a strength of character. And to me, somebody who's really successful, who's prepared to say, I'm prepared to close that chapter completely and say, I don't even want to share it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm moving on to a far more healthy way of living and lifestyle that can be one that promotes life and wellness and healthy living, and not to be able to say, I'm not prepared to share my story because I don't want to give people the wrong ideas. That also is a tremendous strength of character. So another thought that I wanted to share with you is a teaching from Ben Zoma in Pirkei Avot, and I put the reference underneath here. You can have a look at where it's referenced in the Ethics of Our Fathers. A teaching that who is a strong person? Somebody who overcomes his evil inclination. So it's not necessarily somebody who becomes a millionaire or a billionaire, but somebody who's able to calm himself and not to become over angry or over excited, but to hold back and be a little bit humble. Another extremely important and very inspiring story comes from a Hasidic Rebbe who's quite an inspiration for me. I love a lot of the stories about him. Is from Reb Zusha of Anipoli. And the story is given that Reb Zusha would share how he would respond when he gets to the world to come, when he passes on from this world, and he would be asked, why did you not become like Avram Avinu, Abraham, our father, our patriarch? And he would say, well, that's because I wasn't Avraham Avinu. And we might say Avram Avinu was extremely successful, and he was. He was the leader of the world, really, in following one God. And he did become he was blessed with financial success. There are all sorts of incredibly inspiring lessons we have to learn from Abraham. But Reb Zusha says, I wasn't Avram Avinu, and therefore I couldn't be like him. I couldn't be him. So he would then be asked, and why were you not like Yitzchak, like Isaac, our forefather? And he would say, well, I wasn't Isaac either. And then he would be asked, why were you not like Yaakov Avinu? And he would say, because I'm not Yaakov. And then the question would be asked, why was he not like Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe, of course, was another figure from the Torah who was extremely successful. He was the leader of the Jewish people leaving the land of Egypt when we came out of slavery, and we progressed through leaving Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt, crossing over the Red Sea, and being able to get to Mount Sinai where we received the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu did tremendous amount for us, and he also was blessed to a certain extent with financial success. He was blessed. He was a leader. He was the greatest prophet of our time, and yet Reb Zusha says, I was not like Moshe Rabbeinu because I wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu. And then the question comes, and Zusha why were you not the best that you could be as Zusha? And he said that's when he would stop and think and contemplate and be concerned as to what he would answer to the master of the universe or to the heavenly court. And so it is for all of us, that we should stop and consider, if we're blessed with certain talents and skills, are we using those talents and skills in a way that's beneficial? Are we using them at all? Or are we being pushed perhaps into a career or into a lifestyle that's not appropriate for us? What kind of education and schooling are we giving to our children? Are we giving them the education that would help them to be successful in their life, in terms of would they be able to have the values and the beliefs and the character to be upstanding people, to be people we can look up to and be able to say, what benefit, what role did you play as children, as adults? What did you do? What did you offer to the world that's of benefit? And if we can be working on ourselves in a way that we're overcoming our challenges and tests in this world and doing it in a way that we can be the best that we can be, then that's what it is to be successful. And hopefully along the way, we will be blessed with whatever our needs are. If it's financial success, then we should be blessed with being able to use that financial success wisely. But with somebody like Reb Zusha of Anipoli, he was a very poor person financially. He lived in a lot of poverty, and there's some beautiful stories shared about the extent to which he was absolutely at peace with his life, and he served his master, the creator of the universe, with simcha, and he was humble, and he did everything he could to help his fellow Jew, despite the fact that he lived in poverty. So just a couple of thoughts for you. Although financial success and independence is important, and it helps us to be able to cover expenses, like if it's Shabbat and you're needing to put food on the table or have guests or buy your Shabbat candles, have appropriate clothing, buy a pair of tefillin, whatever it is to be able to function in this world effectively. Money is important, but it's not the only thing. So just a couple of thoughts for you as to just another thought from Ben Zoma, a carry on. Ben Zoma taught us so much, and on the one hand, we learn about who it is who's a strong person, one who can overcome his evil inclination or his anger. Ben Zoma also taught us who is a wealthy person, and of course he teaches the one who is happy with his lot. That's what it is we can learn from Reb Zusha as well, and from many other of our Torah sages, the rabbis, the Hasidic rabbis. There's so much that we can learn and inspiration that we can gain in our journey through life. So I hope you'll join me in another video. If you have any questions, do ask them in the comments below, or send me a question via my website at beahappymom.com. See you in the next video.